Hello, welcome everyone. Look at this, what a great time to gather. I see new friends and old friends. Welcome everyone. It is wonderful to have you joining us for our second quarterly BPNN webinar of 2023. Seems like days just keep on flying by. We have a wonderful presentation for you all today. We're going to give everyone a moment to get settled in and just excited to have you here for this webinar where we'll be exploring a world of sovereignty and inclusion. It is part one of a two-part series. So that means we're going to have more than 4 BPNN quarterly calls this year, which is super exciting. So I am just glad to have you all joining us today, and I look forward to being able to have you learn some more from this wonderful presentation. I'm going to give us a chance as we continue having others join us to encourage you. Share your name, your role, your state in the chat. Would love to see who we have. And as you're doing that, my name is Kara George. I am the Parent Partnership Associate with the Children's Trust Fund Alliance, and I help with managing the BPNN. You probably get lots of emails from me, but it's because I like to share great information and tools and resources with our Birth Parent National Network. So I hope that you have been able to check out some of those great new resources and information that's been shared, and would love to get to know who do we have here, because we have quite the audience building up. Rose, you're here. Yay. Hi, Rose. It's great to have you joining us. Who else do we have here today joining us?
Rolando Bini from Parents in Action from New York right now.
Great. Welcome, Rolando. So great to have you joining us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Glad to have you here. I see Christina Romero is in the house. Hey, Miss Christina, great to have you here. Michael Simmons, you are here. Look at all these great friends. Kimberly Navarro. We've got Kikora Dorsey from Casey Family Programs and Jenny Gentry. Welcome. Love it when partners are here. Parents are here. Such a great opportunity. Ooh, Isabel, you are here. Hello. It is great to have you joining us. It is so great. Look at all these awesome friends. Oh my goodness. I could spend all day just saying welcome to each and every one of you, but we have an awesome jam-packed event. So I encourage you, please keep chiming in the chat today. If there's questions that you have or ideas pop into your mind, and I know our presenters today will be taking questions at 2 points in our presentation today. First, after our public policy update, and then second, after the presentation concludes. So keep this chat box busy. We will be also dropping links and information in that. And with that, let's get started with learning a little bit more about our awesome 2 co-facilitators that we have joining us today. And so I would like to start first by welcoming Tremel Mitchell from the great state of Alabama. Tremel, welcome, and I'll turn it to you to share a few words and introduce yourself.
Well, hello, everyone. It's always good to see y'all's amazing faces. And those who I can't see your face, I'm just glad you're here. We have some amazing speakers today. My name is Tremel Mitchell. I am a full-time single father of 2 beautiful babies who just turned 9 and 10 this month. So we're excited. It's been birthday month for me. A lot of cake and ice cream. I probably don't need it, but it's been good. I'm also travel as a national speaker. Been mentored by Eric Thomas, known as ET, and just been able to stand in for fathers and moms and children all around the nation and here in my state of Alabama. And so excited to be a part of everything we're doing and just partnering with you guys and building so many authentic relationships. So that's a little bit about me, and can't wait to hear about more of what our great speakers have for today.
Thanks so much, Tremel. And thank you so much for being a co-facilitator this year with the BPNN. And now I'd love to turn it over to Miss Jody Rogers from California to share a little bit about herself and what she loves about the Birth Parent National Network.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jody Rogers. I am from Sonoma County, California. I'm really excited to be here today, and I'm really excited for what we have in store today from our amazing presenters. When I reflect on what I love about the Birth Parent National Network, I would just say it is the building of relationships, right? And the way we can all learn from each other and grow from each other. I feel like once I found the Birth Parent National Network, I was able to come. There was a place that I was able to come and I was able to just unpack whatever I was carrying, whether it was pain or confusion, or even if it was to celebrate something great that had just happened. And it felt like I had a family of support around me in that. So I find it just to be a place where we get to really heal and grow and learn and just be together. And so with that said, I am going to ask Kara if you could open up the agenda for us. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at today's agenda. We already completed our welcome and introductions. And so up next, we will have a policy update, and then we're going to hand it back to Kara to go over our group norms. We are going to have our opening intentions and a background on ICWA, followed up by an ICWA in practice. Then we will move into an opportunity to have questions and answers. And then we will have some announcements. And then last but not least, our evaluation. We ask that everybody fills out the evaluation. It's really important. And we love hearing from you guys, what we can improve, what you guys want to hear. So all of that's super helpful. So, and now I want to welcome Emily to share our policy update with us today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am going to give you a really brief kind of overview of Holland v. Brackeen, a very high level. My understanding is that you're going to have a really comprehensive, in-depth conversation around the Indian Child Welfare Act. So I just wanted to kind of tee this up as a hot topic. This is a case many of you have likely heard of, that was heard at the U.S. Supreme Court on November 9th, 2022. It was argued in front of the full court. And we expect a decision in this case before the end of this current term, which ends in June. So you can see there's no rhyme or reason to when the Supreme Court issues its opinions, other than opinions that are heard in the fall. If they don't get issued until June, it just means that the court is really having a lot of conversation about the decision it's going to issue, regardless of where they come down in their opinions, because this case is such an important piece of, it involves an important piece of legislation. The justices likely don't all agree on where the court should rule or how the court should rule. They're having a lot of conversations about how they're going to issue their opinion, what they're going to say, and how they're going to rule. So the case was argued in November, but it was actually initiated back in 2017. So the Brackeen case is actually a consolidated group of cases that are challenging the constitutionality of the Indian Child Welfare Act. You're going to hear more about what ICWA, what ICWA is in a little bit. But the case is Chad and Jennifer Brackeen are the named individual plaintiffs here. And they filed back in 2017, they filed an adoption, a petition to adopt a boy who was from the Navajo tribe. And ICWA, given how ICWA is structured, didn't allow their petition to immediately go through. ICWA sets a standard on how Native children are to be treated in the child welfare system. So Chad and Jennifer Brackeen were a non-Native couple who were challenging the validity of ICWA because they wanted to adopt this child. Several individuals and states filed a lawsuit challenging the ICWA as violating the US Constitution. And the technical provision that they are challenging is the 10th Amendment, which basically says any rights not particularly enumerated to the federal government are reserved to the states. And family law, traditionally, child welfare law, is reserved to each individual state to determine how family law is administered in their states. However, ICWA is a federal law that governs how tribes and Native children are to be treated in the child welfare system. So the petitioners in this case were challenging ICWA under the 10th Amendment. The original district court where the case was filed ruled in favor of the plaintiffs and found ICWA unconstitutional. The federal government appealed to the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the lower court ruling. And then they went to a rehearing en banc, which means the 3-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit issued the original opinion, and then going en banc means the entire circuit, every judge in the entire circuit gets to hear the case again and make its decision. At the rehearing en banc in the Fifth Circuit, the court found, the entire panel found that parts of the law were constitutional, parts of the law were unconstitutional. The opinion issued in that case, in that hearing, was many pages long and incredibly technical and nuanced. So the appeal went up to the Supreme Court, and that's how it ended up at the US Supreme Court on November 9th for hearing on November 9th in 2022. So you can see that this case has been 5 years in the making, and there are some pretty big implications. Challenging a federal law, you're going to hear about why ICWA came to be, but ICWA is, from the Casey perspective, which is why we see this case as so important, ICWA is the gold standard by which Casey models its child welfare practice. Child welfare organizations agree that the values inherent in ICWA are the gold standard for child welfare for all children and families, and that Casey Family Programs, for example, has structured its social work practice and its direct services for all children and families, not just tribal children, and it serves all of our children according to the core principles outlined in ICWA, where children are best served by preserving as many connections with their birth family and community and their culture as can safely be done. Their better placement decisions result from applying a very structured and transparent and objective framework, which helps to guard against implicit biases and prioritizes maintaining a child's connections and minimizes the discretion to sever community ties. So again, the gold standard is about safely preserving family connections, cultural ties, etc. So Casey's interest in this case is incredibly high. We filed an amicus brief with a host of other child welfare organizations, including the Child Welfare League of America, Annie E. Casey Foundation, Foster Club, and a number of organizations representing people with youth and people with lived experience. And again, the question that the court is considering is pretty narrow about whether or not ICWA violates the 10th Amendment. But the potential implications here are quite broad. There are a host of issues at play here, one of which is tribal sovereignty. And if parts of or all of ICWA are overturned in this case, it could have many implications for other issues around tribal sovereignty in other contexts, not just in the child welfare context. So this case is being watched by a whole host of groups, constituencies, organizations, state and local governments who will have an interest in tribal sovereignty, tribal issues, family law, and child welfare issues. I'm going to stop because I don't want to hit folks with a bunch of technical pieces of the law. I am not an ICWA expert, as you can probably gather. You're going to hear from some folks later on in depth on ICWA who are experts in that area. But I am happy to take any questions if folks have them. But again, we're gonna hear the decision from the court in the next few weeks. The thing that I will close with is Casey will always hold up the values embedded in the Indian Child Welfare Act. That's how we do our work. And regardless of whether or not ICWA stands as it is currently written in the law, whether it is struck down in part, whether it changes at all with the pending Supreme Court decision, Casey will always operate under the gold standard of ICWA's core values. And I think that will be ICWA's lasting legacy, regardless of what happens, because it is clear from the research and data that we have from the field that this is the best way to serve children and families. And we have pretty universal agreement across child welfare organizations and practice groups that this is the way to operate a child welfare system. Many states have enacted state level ICWAs. So, you know, the principles behind ICWA will live on, but the implications for striking down a federal law are generally pretty far and wide. So we are all waiting with bated breath to see what the court will do. Arguments indicate that there will be likely be a very targeted, specific, and nuanced opinion coming from the court. My guess is that you will have a majority opinion, and then you will have many either dissenting or concurring opinions that have different points of views articulated, but the majority opinion is the one that will control going forward. So I'm going to stop there.
I just want to say thank you so much, Emily, and thank you for sharing with us today. And I know we all look so forward to hearing as this progresses, to hearing as things move along. And what comes to the Jody heart, right, is as you were sharing, like Casey's core values is, you know, that's just one of the many reasons that Casey Family Programs is the amazing entity that it is, right? Like it just fills my heart. And so with that said, I want to pass it to Kara to go over some group norms and to see if anybody has some questions for Emily.
Great. Thank you so much, Jody. And thank you, Emily. I think one of the things that I've most appreciated is our partnership with Casey to help everyone stay up to date on current events, such as this important ruling that will be coming any day. Rolando, I saw you raise a hand with a question, so I want to pass it to you.
Thank you. Well, I'm a Latino immigrant, and I'm glad that Casey is in the right side of history. It's not enough what other people have done to the Indian tribes, taking their land, their culture, they tried to destroy them, they put in reservations, and now for a couple of white people trying to commit what I believe to be cultural genocide, I think is very wrong. I think families, the natural family, the natural biological family is the cell of human society. And now we have a lot of alternative families that are attacking the biological family, and they have a lot of political power and economic power. And I think if they can break this Indian Tribe Act, it will be the first step in destroying further. I think that the children, I think that we need to try to stop and slow down what I call illegal and forced adoptions. Every study shows that children being grown under their biological parents obtain optimum development, anything else second best. So I hope, I pray that the children go back to the biological parents. Why were they terminated? Crooked judges terminate parental rights on the ridiculous excuse. And I've seen in New York children who were given to non-biological gay couples against their own biological family who wanted to adopt the children. The couple adopted the child, the two lesbians. They keep it for a month. They were separated. They gave it back to the addicted birth parents, and they kept getting the money, which is a lot of money that they could get until the children are 25 years old. So I pray that the children go back to the tribe where they belong. Enough harm we have done to those tribes, try to destroy there, and now they are trying to get into their children. That's what I have to say. I have very strong feelings about this.
Thank you,
And
Rolando.
I am sorry if I offended anybody.
Rolando, thank you for your comments and for echoing your thoughts today. I appreciate that. And I especially appreciate what you said at the end because I think this is a very hot topic and there are a lot of feels around it. And that is one of the reasons why we will establish some group norms as we really start to work to unpack ICWA and what is the Indian Child Welfare Act, because we want to be very aware of that. I know one of the questions that came in, Emily, was one specifically about those core values that you referenced. And I want to let everyone know that Michael and Shauna are going to really dive deep into each of those. They'll let you know what they are and kind of do an explanation into each. But I do see that there was one question that came in, Emily, that you may or may not be able to answer. And it is, has the Navajo tribe been allowed to have any input on the court case? Do you have any awareness about that, Emily?
I believe the Navajo tribe is a party in defense of ICWA. I don't know for sure, but I can get that information and get back to you.
Great, thank you so much,
Right.
Emily.
And there was a question before that, which I didn't, I apologize.
Okay, go back up. Any other questions that I might have missed? And please feel free to raise hand. I see just the core values piece and we'll hit on that. So one of the reasons, as Michael and Shauna planned this out, and as we talked with Emily for the public policy piece of this, we want to keep the Birth Parent National Network apprised of what is going on, just as we did when COVID was happening. And so what our plans are is this is going to be a two-part series, which is why I said we are going to have more than 4 quarterly webinars this year. So once a ruling is made at the Supreme Court level, after today's presentation and why Jody so heavily plugged the evaluation today, we are really going to be building out a part 2 to this in partnership with Casey's team, public policy experts, and Emily and Michael and Shauna coming back to kind of do even a further dive into this. Because as we watched all of you register for the training today, we know all of you have different experiences and understanding of ICWA, or the Indian Child Welfare Act. And so, Emily, I really appreciate you kicking us off with what is currently happening in the scope of things. And what I appreciate about now is this is an opportunity for us to shift from knowing that this is something happening live in our world as we speak. And Rolando, thank you for those remarks that you had to share. And that's where this piece of kind of establishing some group norms is going to come in. We really encourage you today, be as present as you're able. We know that looks different for everybody. Some of you are multitasking or doing other pieces. Emily, thank you so much for dropping in some more details for all of us. There's 486 tribal nations, 59 Native organizations, 31 child welfare orgs, 26 states plus DC, and 77 members of Congress offered to support for ICWA. That's incredible. Wow. So thinking about that, how do we show up and be really present to understand the Indian Child Welfare Act? How do we honor confidentiality today in this space? Recognizing that for some, as we look to this, we are going to be hearing about harm that has been done to families and children. Some may elevate some of those thoughts today. And so how do we honor the confidentiality of this space? How do we also assume that everyone is coming with best intent, meaning we're here to learn, we're here to grow together, we're here to better understand? How do we respect each other's voices, being able to step forward and also step back and making sure we're really kind of listening? Are we hearing the message that that person who's speaking is offering for us to hear? Are we speaking our truth? How are we going to take care of ourselves? Because we're going to learn a lot today, mixed in with not only learning about how ICWA came to be, learning and better understanding culture. But also we're going to have the opportunity to really hear from Shauna and Michael personal lived experience. So I encourage you to take care of yourself, but also I encourage you to relax and have fun. Please engage within the chat. Ask questions. There's going to be several times where Michael and Shauna will also ask some feedback, some thoughts. And I encourage you to be as interactive with us today as possible. But I just want to see, is there anything else that we could do for all of you who are joining today to help make this a comfortable opportunity to ask questions if you don't understand something, to be able to understand the Indian Child Welfare Act, and most importantly, understand how it impacts families. And so I just want to give a pause to see if there's anything else that we could add to this list to help. And if not, then we will get started. So just give it a few minutes in case anyone's typing thoughts. It's going to be a great day. Lots of information. And for those of you who love catching data and things and try to pay attention to slides and chat, I know there's great things already building in the chat. Don't worry, we'll be saving that and kind of pulling that out. And today, the slides, the recording, the resources, all of that is going to be posted to the BPNN webpage as quickly as possible at the conclusion of the webinar today. So know that that is happening as a resource for you. So don't feel like you have to be like crazy writing things down. And you will, for the links, Michael, no worries. That's going to be something that we'll put together for you in the handouts. So no worries about having to download links to things. We'll make sure that you have access to all those materials because Michael and Shauna have some additional great resources for you all that we'll make sure you have access to. Great question. All right, well, if there are no questions, then I will turn it back over to my friend Jody to introduce our incredible team of presenters. But Emily, I just want to thank you again and thank Casey for their partnership for the Birthright National Network to be able to have the opportunity to get such great updates of current events that are happening in our world today. Jody, take us away.
Yes, so up next, I am super honored to get to be the one to introduce to you two very dear people to my heart. Michael Huesca from California and Shauna King from Minnesota. Both Michael and Shauna are members of the BPAC and the Birth Parent National Network, as well as the Birth and Foster Parent Partnership. Both are known for their expertise with ICWA, as well as nationally known speakers. I just want to say, I think you guys are all in for a treat today, and I'm really excited. So now I'm going to pass it to Shauna to kick us off.
Dosha, everybody. I wanted to first start off by saying that I want to open with a smudge, but I just want to let you know a lot of people do land acknowledgements now, and it kind of has become the thing to do. And I'm not going to do a land acknowledgement because I personally believe that without any change, land acknowledgements don't really mean anything. And I was reading an article, and it talked about a Hollywood producer who had a stagehand, and they asked the stagehand if they wanted to have a associate's producer's credit. And they said, sure. And somebody who overheard that asked, what is that? And they answered, it's what you give instead of a raise. So a land acknowledgement, I feel like, is something people are doing with no intent of giving back our land. But that being said, that is just my personal opinion, and is why I'm not doing a land acknowledgement. But I do want to open up this conversation in a good way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer a smudge, and basically, smudging is a way to clear negative energy. I do it every morning. I do it when I need to. We do it in our office a lot. I don't really do it in my office. So if my boss is on here, now she knows I'm doing it in my office. But we do it in our conference room. We do it with our families. We do it before court. We do it when we feel like we need to cleanse our spirit. and remove negative energy. So I'm just going to offer this up. I'm going to do it for myself, and then we can start this wonderful conversation that Michael and I are about to have. Just got to make sure that it's lit right. So this is just sage. This is sage from my reserve that I picked this summer at ceremony. And basically, you know, I just kind of smudge myself, and just to start this off in a good way. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of topics that are going to be triggering. We're going to talk about a lot of things that are traumatized. So I encourage you to step away if you have to get up and take a breath. Also to take a big drink of water if you have some water around you. If you do get triggered, that's always healing and helpful. So just to start us off a good way. And then I don't know, Michael, if you had anything else to say about land acknowledgements.
Yeah, I wanted to just say that, you know, it's so brilliant how Shauna and I have been put here together under the wisdom of the Creator. He really brought us for a reason. And one thing that has always resonated with me with land acknowledgements is it always felt a little bit like it was, you know, somewhat sanitizing history. And when someone's telling me, yeah, you were here, but this is mine now, it's what it kind of felt like. So we collectively decided that this was the reason we wanted to start this with a smudge, and a traditional smudge, and offer some opportunity for the best intentions, which is what we're here today to deliver.
Thank you, Michael, for that. So when a lot of times when I present, we show a video prior to this, and Michael and I have both used this video. We use it a lot at the Law Center. It's from a style horse. And it really shows the impact of our history and intergenerational trauma. So I don't know if we can start that to play.
Yeah, and I know that there's a tendency to get up and leave when videos come on. Please, this is just really worth the 6 minutes in which it is. I hope you can stay and enjoy.
One morning I woke up and I heard my brother crying. He was screaming so loud you thought someone was dying. "Mom, Dad," he screamed, but there was no use trying. They weren't around. I ran outside and saw he'd had a pretty bad crash. His bike was in the ditch, down his arm a bloody gash. He looked so pitiful, just sitting there in the dirt amongst the trash, crying, "I want Mom and Dad." I picked him up and started running toward my uncle's up the way. It started raining and got real dark. You could barely tell it was day. My brother cried and asked, "Sister, where's Mom?" I didn't know what to say, when the truth is, I don't know. When my uncle saw us coming, he ran into the yard. He took my brother from me and he held him in his arms. When he saw my face, I could tell he was alarmed. And he said, "What happened? Did you fall too?" "Uncle, I'm so tired of wondering why. Why do they drink? Why do they do drugs? Why do they leave us? Why?" He said, "Sister, it's hard to explain." And I said, "Uncle, try." And then he told this story.
Once this land was teepees as far as you can see. The water was clean, the land pristine. We were where we were meant to be. Then strangers came across the sea and brought with them their disease. Our people cried and prayed and sang, but it brought them to their knees.
Warrior spirits live within.
Imagine that your family, and most of all your tribe, what if most of everyone you love suddenly got sick and died? And before you even had a chance to bury them and mourn, the strangers came and took away the land where you were born. And you wondered if your parents even cared as they stole you and your brother away, or if they'd been so beaten down they had nothing left to say. And then at school, they cut your hair and beat you if you spoke the language that Creator gave our people when earth awoke.
We will rise up from the darkness. We will overcome the pain. Warrior spirits live within us. We shall remain.
Sister, I'm not trying to tell you that your mom and dad are okay, or that they are not responsible for the choices that they've made. But you see this bloody wound on your little brother's arm. If we don't clean it, it won't heal and it'll do all kinds of harm. Those deep wounds of our ancestors still bleed within our hearts. When we remember all they've done, that's where the healing starts. So every morning when you wake, you pray this prayer out loud. Creator, help me live in a way that would make my ancestors proud.
We will rise up from the darkness.
Don't you forget this. You can be anything you want to be.
We will overcome the pain.
Just work hard, never give up. Perseverance is the key.
Warrior spirits live within
Strength,
us.
dignity, honor, that's all in your family tree. So hold your head up high and know that.
We shall remain. We will rise up from the darkness.
Creator, help me live in a way that will make my ancestors proud.
We will overcome the pain.
Creator, help me live in a way that will make my ancestors proud.
Warrior spirits live within us.
Creator, help me live in a way that will make my ancestors proud.
We shall remain.
Little brother, we will rise up from this darkness. Little brother, we will overcome the pain. Remember, warrior spirits live within us. We shall remain.
I get a lump in my throat every time I watch that, and I have to drink a glass sip of water.
Me too. It's quite a moving experience, and it is so real.
So, I mean, so that video is kind of a little bit of the intent that Michael and I have to talk a little bit about the history of ICWA, and to really tie it into why ICWA is important today. And I don't know if somebody can pull up our slides. I'll pass it over to Michael.
Thanks, and I think Kara is doing that as we speak. 1 minute, 1 second. So amazing to see all these great faces on here. So many friends. I'm so glad to see everybody. Kara's working on pulling up that slide. No pressure.
I do want to mention one thing. The land acknowledgement piece is my personal opinion. We did leave a link there in the resource page of this at the end of this slide that I got from a dear friend, Kimberly Navarro. you can look up the land that you're on, the tribes that were there that owned the land.
Thanks for that. And hi, Kimberly. Good to see you here too. So we're going to start off the conversation with, some background on ICWA. As we heard earlier, ICWA was started in 1978. It was a federal law. And I want to make sure everybody understands that ICWA is not a race-based law. ICWA is a law that was based on sovereignty. And so that is a very important identification that I think we need to be clear on, because sovereignty means that two governments got together and they created this agreement. It was a treaty, and it was the nations, the tribal nations, and it was the United States government. So the constitutionality of ICWA, we need to continue to remember that primary fact. Parent and children have to be eligible to be enrolled in with a federally recognized tribe. Here we offer that there are 574 federally recognized tribes and around 400 unrecognized. I need to just be mindful to acknowledge that, when we think about the powers of white supremacy, we think about how these things were incorporated into continuing to facilitate the supremacy from that ability of really minimalizing and extinguishing the Indian. 400 unrecognized tribes. We know that they're native. We know that they're indigenous. We go to the next slide. I would argue, as my ancestors who are Mexican, I am a Mexican indigenous man, and I recognize that at one point, much of Mexico was part of the Americas. And so I bring this up because the evil genius of white supremacy often prevents us from uniting, because we're so busy arguing about who's more indigenous, who's not. We're so busy about arguing who's been harmed, who's been subjected to different harms, and whose harm is greater. That's, in my opinion, that's all part of the evil genius of white supremacy. Because if we could all get together on the same page and we all work in a way where ICWA was available for every child, honoring sovereignty and knowing that Native children have priority with ICWA. But what if we were able to create a space where every child had the ability of receiving ICWA? Because I think about how many children, looking at this map, how many children that are Native descendants are not being eligible for ICWA? How many of children are being put through the system? I know myself, as a Mexican American, there was a movement that was considered a Chicano movement at one point, because Mexicans lost their identity. We felt like we didn't have a place, right? And many times we would see that space where we were just trying to have some identity. I bring this up because it is so important to recognize how the supremacy has always tried to extinguish our identity and keep us from moving in a space connected to one another, jointly together. And so our hope is to really dive into understanding what ICWA is. We wanted to give you the contents of the history of why it was created. I think it is so important to recognize that Native children remain the highest disproportionate number of children in care. And so even though ICWA exists, and we know ICWA works, and we know ICWA is a great tool, people are not doing it, or it's not being implemented properly, or there are some other reasons why Native children continue to be in the system on such great levels of representation. Shauna, did you have anything to add to that? Or
I just want to say that I recognize you as my Indigenous brother, and I appreciate that you bring up this fact. I also think it's important to consider, you know, the children that are at powwows that their parents aren't eligible due to blood quantums. And that if we did, you know, expand the key principles of ICWA to all children, that we could keep more Native children and other races too out of the system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that. You know, I think that for me, you know, trying to connect my identity, even as a tribal administrator working for tribes, you know, I get frustrated when I hear I'm not able to serve a child who's clearly Native, but because of the quantum or because they're not being brought into a federally recognized tribe, right? Or their tribe is a state recognized tribe, which we can't offer the services. So the goal is, what if we just start working every day, all of us, every one of us on this call, what if we were to learn the principles and start implementing it in everything that we can do? What if we can do that? And so here we go.
Right. So today we want to talk about 4 key principles. And when we talk about these principles, we want everyone in the audience to think about how they're incorporating this within their own families that they're working with. So whether or not you're working with Indian families, if you are applying these principles to the families that you're working with, because we truly believe that they're healing. And one thing that my boss always talks about is the fact that the reason ICWA came about is because there were a lot of children being removed from homes, and there were a lot of grandmas and aunties that were just sick of that. And they came and sat down and created ICWA. One of the places that they were able to meet was here in Minnesota, and I'm super proud of that. So we're going to go over 4 key principles. The first principle is the right to their family and tribal community. The second principle is active efforts to preserve and reunify families. Principle number 3 is valuing inclusive and diverse culture practice. And the 4th one is authentic engagement with tribes. So we will be tying this into history, and we're not going to be going that far back. This is history that I can tie to my mom, and then I can tie to my grandma and to my aunties and uncles. So this was in the last 100 years. And I always say this anytime I talk. So if any of you have ever heard me talk, I am a direct result of what this government did to my people. I was in foster care as a child, and it had my children in foster care. And I truly believe that in order for my people to heal, we need to have, you know, our traditions and we need to preserve, you know, our culture, and we need to continue to keep ties to our family. And I think you can say that about any kid in the United States, right?
And
So,
I think,
go ahead.
sorry, and I just wanted to add to Shauna's point, you know, the history we're talking about can be connected directly to us. The history we're talking about is the direct impact of historical and intergenerational trauma, right? And so what we're talking about is the effects on Shauna came from her historical, her intergenerational trauma. So, sorry, Shauna, go ahead.
No, that's fine. That's perfect.
So, children's rights to their family and community, and as Shauna talked about, the boarding schools, the adoption era, relocation, you know, these all have direct impacts. I have an elder that I serve who was sharing with me. She says, you know, at the age of 16, I was shipped off to a boarding school. I left and I didn't want to come back. And I said, you didn't want to come back? She said, no, I didn't. I thought I was being sent away for a reason. You know, I thought my parents didn't want me. I thought my family didn't want me. There were so many things that were going through my head that I thought that I caused this removal. I thought that I was part of the reason for that. Shauna, did you want to add anything more?
No, I guess, I think when we talk about each and one of these things, I can correlate all of this to my family, and so can Michael. I just kind of want to point out, we specifically chose this picture because it's a Hispanic family, and they're Hispanic indigenous family, and it talks, and it has, the cartoon has to do with trauma, and I just love it. I love that we chose that picture.
Yeah, and I know I'll have an opportunity to say this a little bit and dive a little bit more. But you know, I come from Mexican indigenous family. My grandmother was a very big part of my life, and when she passed, she always told me that in California in the 1910s, from 1910 to 1920, that it was much better to identify as Mexican than indigenous. They were killing natives. And so you couldn't practice your traditional cultures. You couldn't practice your traditional religion, your traditional faiths. And you certainly couldn't speak your traditional language. Spanish was not their traditional language. And so when she passed, one of her biggest regrets was that she had forgotten how to speak her language. And that has always sat with me as a piece of the trauma which I carry today.
Okay, so the first thing, we really wanted to highlight is the boarding schools. And I know there's been a lot of recent news around that, where they're actually finding bodies of children that just had disappeared forever. And I think it's important to remember, or to think about, the fact that when these children were removed from their families, the families didn't get a say. They didn't get a say. It's like, no, I can do this. I can teach my children. They didn't get a say, and they were forcibly removed and put into boarding school. The first boarding school was in Pennsylvania, Carlisle Indian School, and it was started by Richard Pratt, and he was the one who coined the phrase, "Kill the Indian, save the man." And I think that is basically, I don't think, that is what they wanted to do. It was a continued form of genocide. And they lost the ability, like Michael's grandma, to speak their language. They lost their family traditions. They lost their cultural traditions. It started with taking them and cutting their hair. And it started with changing their clothes. They were beaten if they spoke their language. They were made to work. Many of them were so young, and they still knew their traditions, that they could travel hundreds of miles by foot to run away, to go to home, because of the conditions that they had to deal with in boarding schools. And then they were directly brought right back to this place where they're being abused, raped, molested, and killed and starved, right? And beaten, and not understanding that, like, their parents still loved them. And I think there's a picture on here that shows a bunch of teepees outside of a boarding school, because these families loved their kids so much, they just wanted to have a glimpse of their children. And then there's handcuffs that they used on children. Those handcuffs are for kids. And that is just so sad. And just imagine, that trauma from all of these things, I carry within me, within my DNA. We all know about intergenerational trauma and historical trauma, and I carry this within me. My parents carried it because my grandparents went through it. So I think it's really important to recognize that this is something that still affects people today. I mean, how many people still have their grandparents around, right? So I don't know if you wanted to say anything, Michael.
No, I think you said it all.
So then we go into the relocation and the adoption era. And so I forgot to put on here the Indian Adoption Project, which was a federal program between 1958 and 1967, which removed Native American children from their homes and put them in white adopted homes. My aunt was adopted out, and she was adopted to a Mormon family, and she still has, you know, Mormon beliefs to this day, but she was made to work. And the saddest part about that is there was no regulations. You could just come, and if a social worker would come to the house and you didn't have electricity, they could just take the child and, you know, not give the parent any warning and adopt them into a white home. A lot of families, when parents would try to regain custody, would be jailed, and they would not win their case, or there wouldn't even be a case. There wouldn't be anything that they could do about these children just being adopted out. So I don't know how many of you out there know people who were around in 1967 or 1958. My dad was born in 1950. I was born in 1974. So this really is something that historically happened in my lifetime. And that I know people that this happened to. And then we talk about the Urban Relocation Act of 1952, which promised Native American people, if they left their reservations, that they could get better jobs, better homes, better educations if they lived in urban cities such as Chicago, Denver, and Los Angeles. I actually have two uncles that moved to Chicago. They were farmers, and they were doing really well on the reservation. They moved to Chicago, became destitute, homeless, and came back alcoholics. It really placed us in a space where we had, it cut off our ties to our families. It cut off our traditional spaces and our ceremonies, because we were in spaces where we couldn't afford to travel back home. And I think like, if you go to the next slide, this is one of the advertisements about it. And I think this picture really says a lot about what was promised. And I just want you to look at all the families on this picture and think to yourself, what does that represent? Like, what does it look like to you? I mean, what do you see? Because to me, it doesn't look like a Native family. It doesn't look like a traditional Native family. It looks like what they wanted Native Americans to be. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I just have to draw this back to extinguish the Indian, kill the Indian. The goal was always to kill the Indian, take the land, right? The goal was always to eliminate. When they intentionally set out to have missions to disconnect people from their tribes, a couple of things happened. If you remember, to be a part of ICWA, you have to be attached to a federally recognized tribe. Well, some tribal members lost their identity along the transformation of being shipped off, right? I believe it was an intentional effort and an intentional attack on it, continuing the efforts to extinguish the Indian. So the more separated the individual became from the tribe, the less likely they were going to be able to be back into the tribe. Tribes were unable to exist in a lot of places, and land was being taken, still. And so this was just another opportunity in a way to steal more land, to steal more dignity and some more him inside of the Native person, and to keep them from the culture, in my opinion.
And I also think that this picture looks like a broken promise. This is what they're going to promise you, and it never came true. There are families who came. I saw a documentary of a family who moved to Los Angeles, and it was a family of 5, and they received $80 a month for like 4 months. And then they were just left to figure it out on their own. And what they left with was just suitcases. Everyone had a suitcase, and that was all their belongings and their prized possessions. And then they were stuck in this urban area, right? And that caused a huge divide between, reservation in Indigenous people and people that were urban natives as well. So for me, I see a continuation of broken promises and broken treaties.
which is why the Brackeen case is so important, because it's a continuous effort to try and take back what little has been given to the Native people as retribution, right? And in ways of true sovereignty, this should not even be a challenge. And so I agree with you, Shauna. It's just continuous broken promises.
A continued way to kill the Indian and save the man, right? Genocide, basically, it's genocide, and we should never be ashamed or afraid to use that word. So, our second principle we really want to discuss is active efforts to preserve and reunify families. And I don't know if anyone understands what active efforts are as opposed to reasonable efforts are, but my boss, Shannon Smith, is the executive director here. And when I ask her about this, she says active efforts is reasonable efforts on steroids. And I think that is so true. Because when I work as a parent mentor here at the Equal Law Center, and we take emergency protective hearings within Hennepin County. And if a case goes non-ICWA, meaning that the parent and child are not eligible within a tribe, that the reasonable efforts are horrible. I couldn't even imagine having to do a case plan without active efforts, providing one-on-one help with somebody is so meaningful, to be supported, to not telling somebody, hey, there's this, what you need is at Cub, there's water there, and that's where you can use your card, rather than saying, hey, let me show you where let me take you here. This is where you can go. Let me show you how to do the process and help them figure it out, I think is really important. And I think that they are something that you absolutely need to do to keep the child in the home, and that I know, and that they are also used to make sure that that child will reunite with their family.
Yeah, and I would say that, it is so awesome to see so many of you that are in the field that could do active efforts versus reasonable efforts. Why? Many of the programs that you work for are already doing active efforts, right? I see you might accompany somebody, pick them up and give them a ride to court. Jody, I've known you to do that. I mean, that's active efforts versus, as Pasquale said, having a documented safety plan and saying, here you go, good luck, have a nice day, right? The real active efforts is something that all of us can do right now when we're engaging with every family that we can do. It is more work, right? But it's what families need. It's what families deserve. It's what our children deserve. And so if we could really hold true to providing every member that we come into contact, every family that we come into contact, a level of our own active efforts, imagine what a transformation that would be for that child's life and that family's life.
Right. And one thing that I think Shannon said as well that really hit home with me is active efforts is what you would do for your own family, right? What you would do. And regardless if it's more work, you're healing a family, you're helping them heal, you're helping families stay together. And that is so important. I mean, I don't care what your cultural background is or race you identify with, but having your family stay together and being able to reunify is what we all want, right? We want that for the families we work with. And I know everybody on this call, I know that you agree with this and that this is kind of in the line of work that you're already in. But what Michael and I want to challenge you to think about when we're talking about these things is what you really can be doing right now in your own jurisdictions and how you can ask for active efforts. And that can be just as little as like, well, you want the client to contact you every day, then maybe provide a phone or maybe provide phone minutes so that they can, right? Because if they don't have a phone or they're homeless and they cannot afford one, there's not even pay phones around, right? And it can be as simple as that. So
Absolutely. I love Shannon. She's such a wise leader.
she really is. I'm so fortunate to have her as a sounding board and just to talk about this. And I think she's younger than me, but like she's what I want to be when I grow up.
You're all whispering. She's all whispering. Next slide.
All right, so principle 3 is valuing inclusive and diverse cultural practices. And so I'm not sure if you guys know, but our traditional ceremonies and practices were outlawed and it was illegal to practice them. And I'm highlighting one, which is the Sundance. It was very illegal. And I just want to say, for me, I truly believe that in order for my people to heal, we need to come back to our traditions and our culture, and we need to practice our ceremonies and learn our languages, right? And many tribes have lost their languages. I know that there is a revitalization of the language that I am learning how to speak, which is Hidatsa. And for a long time, we were phonetically spelling it, but now we have met with elders and, we're relearning it and we're working really hard to keep that alive. Also the Sundance ceremony, I was able to participate in Sundance ceremony in Nez Perce tribe in Idaho, and they didn't have a Sundance for 150 years. So I was able to attend the Sundance, the first Sundance they had in 150 years, and I was the very first person to get my name on at Sundance, which is Madakabe Hoba Mia, which means Holy Owl Woman. And I am forever proud of that. And I'm forever honored that I got to be in that space with that tribe as they were able to practice that again. I also support my brother who dealt with addiction his entire life and had his kids in out-of-home placement. And I'm very proud that I'll be presenting with him in North Dakota in July. And how he keeps sober is he Sundances, and it's a 4-year commitment, and I go and support him every year. I would have Sundance, but I had to go through a year of mourning, so I will start Sundancing this year. And I just think, for me, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have these practices and these cultures and the smudging that I did for you every morning, because life is hard. Just because you try and get your life together and get out of child protection doesn't mean that bad stuff still doesn't happen, right? So if I wasn't able to have the people that are around me that remind me, hey, smudge, or did you talk with the elder, or call your auntie, and have the traditions that I have. I recently went to a training. And this training was, I had some people from work with me, was at a place that I lived for 4 years called Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center. And they had housing for women, Native American women. And my son passed away a little over a year ago, and he was able to have his funeral in their space there. And it's a really beautiful agency here in the Native American community here in the Twin Cities. And I went to an actual training there, and it was the first time I set foot in that space since my son's funeral. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna take a drink of water here. And it was hard, but I had people around me that supported me. And afterwards, we went out and we were able to pick cedar. And we came back to our office and we sat down and we made a bunch of tobacco ties and made a bunch of cedar ties, and it was so beautiful and it was so healing, and that was far better than a lot of my therapy sessions I go to, right? So I think, that the fact that these are just coming back into our lives and that we're using them to help us heal as people is super important. And I think that's one thing that ICWA does provide, is that they value our cultures.
Thank you for sharing that, Shauna. I think that it is so important to hear, how this is incorporating healing, right? How this brings us towards healing, to experience the piece about, I've shared this before about my grandmother, and some of you who are Latino, you might know the story. My grandmother was considered a person who had healing. She was not a medicine woman, but she was a spiritual person and was able to heal. And she, when my son was born, he had colic really bad, and she came to him and said, "Oh, he needs a limpia." When I had no idea what that meant, right? But she prayed over him, rubbed him, and massaged him with an egg. And she did what she was supposed to do. And all of a sudden, that first night, he slept. And it was such an incredible feeling because I had no idea, of this power, right? Or of this experience. When I got up the next morning, the egg was completely cooked. And it was such an incredible, aha for me, being second generation Latino, Mexican American. I didn't feel like I had an identity for so long. Learning these experiences, learning from my grandmother, learning from those who are willing to teach me, really helped me understand who I am and where I came from. It sparked something in me because there is a tendency to not at some point want to know. We want to be rebels. We want to get out there, take on the world. But to have these connections, to be able to have these cultural pieces to go back to rely on, to just feel a part. I think that is so important to know. And I also think that as we talk about child welfare, one of the biggest, most unjust pieces of child welfare is the separation, right? And what we see is there is so much separation that we don't see authentic engagement with tribes, let alone families, right? And so in the situation of tribes, and I can tell you as a tribal administrator, my experience was awkward because you would think that the tribe would take every child that came because a tribe has to acknowledge the child. So not only is the child have to be a registered member of a federally recognized tribe, the law says, right? The tribe then has to be able to claim that child. And so there's a process that happens. And believe it or not, there are some tribes that don't claim every child that comes through. There are some tribes who, want to really investigate. And part, again, of the white supremacy power is we have this idea that if we share, even with each other, we're losing something because there's so much that has been given and taken. And even in financial spaces, there's limited money. You only have so many people you can help. So there's certain things that have been set up to continue to push the white supremacy agenda when it comes to, even within the instruction, the structure of the tribe, when it comes to sovereignty and true well-being of children. That was a lot that I said right there, but I certainly believe that even tribes have difficulties getting away from the evil genius of white supremacy because we divide within ourselves sometimes. And so as a tribal administrator, I took the role on taking on every child that went into the system, making sure that the tribe was at the table, making sure the tribe was able to advise, because we as tribal folks, we know the family. We know the child. In more cases than not, we know the aunties, we know the uncles, we know all of the components that are key, which is the placement preference, right? We know that that the cousin down the street is the care provider. We know that the mom and dad are living on opposite ends of the reservation, or maybe that they don't live on the reservation. So there's so many key things that by bringing the tribe in and having authentic engagement with the tribe really opens up, and placement preference is a big piece of that. Traditional culture. We also not only do we understand that culture, we know when there's going to be a powwow. We know when there's going to be a ceremony. So making sure that our children are reconnected and are invited back into that, are there in that space, not as an invitee, but as an honoree, right? As a person we want to lift, as a person we want to hold. It is so important to tribes to be able to help each other heal. The other thing I will say is that as a tribal administrator, one of my last acts, my contract was for 2 years. One of my last acts as a tribal administrator was to buy back land. And I was able to acquire 628 acres of land from a neighboring organization that had owned and had stolen this land. And what was so incredible was that the people were so moved by this, because it was a sense of hope. Even though we had to pay for the land back, it ignited a sense of hope. It offered families some healing, because the fact that they could see and have pride that this generation was the generation that was able to show the ancestors that they were able to get back this land was so powerful, and continues to be a moving drive for that nation that I represented in a direction to continue to heal.
I love that, Michael. And I just want to say that, that is why it's important to engage the tribe. And I know here in Minnesota, the tribe is right up there at the table with the county and the attorneys and the parents. And that's so important to have their input. And so I just got notification that I have only 3 minutes to tell my story. So I feel like a lot of you have already heard it. But I have some pictures. So there's me as a little girl. And when I look at that picture, this only picture I have of myself when I was little. I was being molested. I was being abused. I was in North Dakota, so I dealt with a lot of racism. I don't know if many of you guys know this, but I am 50% Indigenous and 50% Black. And so I was teased a lot as a child, and I didn't have anybody that I identified with, because I grew up in Fargo. So I was, if you can consider Fargo urban, back in the 70s and 80s, it was more urban than my reserve, right? And so if you click on to the next picture, that is me when I entered into foster care. I entered into foster care at 14, and I was one of the children that should have been placed in foster care, or at least my family should have been provided services, right? And in this case plan, I know that I was so happy to not have to wake up and be hidden in a closet so I wouldn't get beaten, or to sleep outside at 3rd grade, or to be molested. When I finally told my dad in 3rd grade, that's when the abuse started. And, the traumas that took place from there were horrible. And when I went into this foster placement, I didn't understand, like, how come my mom would let that happen to me? Like, what, like, didn't she care? Didn't she love me? And to this day, I still do not have a good relationship. ICWA was not involved in my case as a child when I was in out of home placement. I lived in 4 different white non-Indigenous foster homes. Never was attached to any of them. My family was the family that in North Dakota that made fry bread at powwows. I was on the process of learning to dance. I was going to be a fancy shawl dancer, and was having my regalia made. And I never got that. To this day, I still don't dance. I am the person who was going to teach me to dance, my cousin, my sister, is actually making me my first pair of moccasins. And I'm so super proud of that, right? And then if you click to the next picture, so that all of that I went through, having no attachment to family, no attachment to foster care, made it so I lost all my traditions, right? I never went to another powwow as a child. I never smelled sage. I never had the family traditions we had. We had traditions for Christmas. We had, different things that we did that were carried on. I never got that, right? Now this next picture is my kids. I'm a mother of 5. And these are my two kids that were placed in foster care, my daughter Danita and my son Joshan. And Joshan's the one that passed away. So this was a really I really don't share pictures when I share my story, but this was like this one's a little close to my heart. So that's when they were placed in foster care. Look how young I was and all the hair I had. And then the next picture is when I reunified with them. And look how much happy they are. And it just, it tells a lot about like a story, like, how sad I was, how much I was hiding. And I didn't know that that wasn't really normal, right? I didn't know, being molested wasn't normal. I didn't know better. That was just my life, and then moving to a space in foster care where I didn't have to worry about that anymore because I got to the age where I knew it wasn't normal. And then having no space and I never saw my sisters again until an adult. I never saw my family. I never went to any powwows or had any tradition. I was just passed along. I was one of those kids with a garbage bag full of clothes if the foster families gave me my clothes back. So that was, led to me, obviously trying to heal my traumas, becoming a heroin addict. And at 33, I decided that was the best idea because I wasn't getting the healing I needed by making all these babies to create my own family for love. I became a heroin addict and I ended up having my kids placed in foster care. Again, I needed to be in child protection or I needed to have the services. I really am truly a believer that the state doesn't need to oversee healing and reunification with families or to be in charge of that. But if the community could have been able to be in charge of that, if we could think about that instead of the state and the government, I think that would have been a much better place for me. But one thing that I want to highlight is that as an adult, ICWA was involved in my life. And what that did was create a space for me to tie back into my culture. Because ICWA was involved in my life, I decided to take Indian studies in college. And that's where I truly learned Native American history because they did not teach it to me in elementary school. And that is where I learned everything that my mom and my grandma and everything was that what my people had gone through. And it wasn't that my mom didn't love me, it's that she didn't know how because her mom didn't know how. Because of what we just talked about directly ties to my family. And I am now wanting to be a part of that healing. In order for that to happen, I have to heal myself. And how I do that is through my traditions and through my culture and through my community. I reach out to my elders. I try to do everything in a good way. I use my traditional medicines for everything. And I also have, with having a tribal liaison involved in my life, having the tribe there at the table allowed me to reconnect with my family. And now they're a big part of my life. And I love that. I go and help support my brother at ceremony. My cousin, like I said, is making me some moccasins, which it means the world to me. But one of the things that means the most is that when my son passed away a year ago, I was able to have his funeral where I spent 4 years or I reunified with my kids. And the community here in the Twin Cities, the Indigenous community really surrounded me and was able to give my son his name, which is Aguchida Ashkianini, which means little warrior man. So he was able to pass, which is part of my culture, with his name so that he could be recognized on the other side. which meant the world to me. Without having ICWA in my life, I probably would have never have had that. And then also because I reconnected with family, I had a lot of aunties and uncles come and grandmas and grandpas for my son. And one of the most beautiful things was at his ceremony, my auntie stood up and she sang a song in Hidatsa. And that's my traditional language. And I feel like when I introduce myself normally, I introduce myself in my language because my ancestors are right behind me and they prayed for me to be here. And I honor them by talking to them first and then introducing myself in English because I know they're here to support me. So being able to have a Hidatsa song being sung at my son's funeral meant the world to me. And I think that would have never been possible if I didn't have ICWA in my community, in my life. And that is why it's so important for all children to have that.
Thank you, Shauna. You are amazing. I love you dearly. And I think that together we were really able to hopefully provide you some things to think about, really understand the history and why ICWA is so important. But not only is it that it's so important, it is the gold standard. So how do we create it and offer it to others, right? To honor the sovereignty, and the Native children's inherent right to ICWA, but to also expand this for all those Native children that are not able to get it, and for all the children that are not able to get it. How do we implement that? And so we really want you to take the time to take a look at the principles again. I think as you look at the principles, you can scope those principles into your work. You can, look at the communities, look at the individuals, look at the real opportunities you have based on those principle structures to really creating a way of making this your practice. So we're super glad you were able to hang in there with us. We've got lots of resources here. These are some incredible resources that you can take a look at on your own. The podcast.
Go ahead. Sorry.
The podcast that someone had talked about, we have up here as well. There's just a lot of good information to have that hopefully you can explore on your own so that you could really look at how you can implement this in your style and in your practice of children well-being.
And we encourage you to look at them for our next part on the series, because we really want to talk about how you can take these key principles and add them into your jurisdiction and how you can ask for active efforts for every child. How can we start implementing that ICWA as the gold standard for all children is where we kind of want to go next, right, Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also just want to mention that you could see what your states are doing about ICWA. There are active efforts that are happening right now to see what happens if something happens to ICWA on a federal level. And so each state has devised, well, many states have devised plans to how they're going to handle ICWA in their own state. So take a look and see what your state is doing. We would really like to have that conversation in the next go around. And if we have time, Kara.
We have one hot question I really want to make sure we ask, just because you both have touched on this several times. And it is, does ICWA only apply if parents and children are enrollable? So if you could just speak to that. And so the answer is yes?
Yeah.
It is, yeah. The both parent and child has to be eligible to be enrolled, and the only deciding factor or people that can do that is the tribe.
The tribes.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, decide, or the tribe has to decide. So, I mean, every single child that comes into the system, every single family should ask if they have Indigenous background. So to see if ICWA could apply, and then it's up to the jurisdictions to reach out to the tribes. So it doesn't matter if you have blonde hair and blue eyes, you still could be indigenous, right? So I think that's a key piece that's missing, is that people don't ask if you're indigenous based upon your looks, or just like what Michael said, right? You know, it's something where, you know, the white man has chosen to not really they want to eradicate basically Native people. So also, if you do have questions about Brackeen, please reach out to the ICWA Law Center. There are two really cool people here who have written an amicus brief for it, and I think it's linked in that in the resource page. But Shannon Smith and Carl Nystrom would be, I'm probably more than happy to answer any questions.
Absolutely. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you, Michael and Shauna, for such an informative and packed webinar today. Thank you both for sharing not only content, but your personal lived experience and your hearts with us. It was definitely a powerful webinar that I think we'll all be reflecting on as we get ready to close out in a very fast way. Don't forget about Family Voices United, a great opportunity to elevate lived voice. They have a new Share Your Perspective question that just got released today. So be watching your email to get the opportunity to share your perspective on that. We have our 9th annual virtual convening coming up in just a few short weeks. So we'll be all back together again. I encourage you, sign up, register, and share this widely. It's about supporting families at the front end of the child welfare system. And let's think about how we bring some of this learning today into that conversation and kind of keep this as an ongoing, evolving conversation. Save the dates. We have Caring Conversations coming up, not next Monday because of the Memorial Day holiday, but the Monday after. And we are going to be having our first BPNN orientation of 2023 on Friday, June 30th. So be watching for more information about that. This is going to be a chance to learn more about the BPNN and all of what we do. So if you have people who are interested, I encourage you to have them join us for that. And our next official webinar will be August 17th, but be watching for a save the date for the part 2. It will be tied in when that Supreme Court decision comes out. So please be watching for that. There may or may not be another special video message also coming out later today or very soon from Shauna and Michael. And please, please, please fill out the evaluation, because that is going to help Michael and Shauna and the team get ready for what is going to be included in part 2. And we use all of what you've been telling us. We love the conversation that has been going on in the chat today. We appreciate your engagement. And as always, please reach out if there's anything that we can do to help you with getting the resources or other information you need. But thank you for being with us. Thank you to Emily, Michael, and Shauna. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So much great things for us to be thinking on, and it will be posted to the BPNN page soon. And Jody, thank you for helping open us. And with that, Tramel, I'm going to pass it to you to close us out for today.
Well, once again, the chat has been off the chain. You guys are just amazing. Thank you, Shauna and Michael. And thank you for everyone being here. I hope that everyone has an amazing rest of the week and weekend, and keep making a difference. You're amazing. You're amazing. Thank you for healing our nation one step at a time and one parent at a time. See you soon.